There is a silence that hits after a super empath walks away, and it is not calm, it is not closure, and it is definitely not peace. It is the kind of silence that shows up when someone finally sees the ashes of what they ruined with their own hands. That is where this story begins. Not with the breakup, not with the lies, not even with the betrayal. It begins in the aftermath, in the stillness, in the moment the narcissist realizes that the one person who truly saw through every mask is gone, and this time they are not coming back. That is the part no one talks about enough. Everyone talks about what the narcissist does to other people, the charm, the control, the mind games, the emotional whiplash, the way they lift someone up just to tear them down. But today we go deeper. We go inside the collapse that happens after they betray the one person who gave them something no one else ever could. Stay with me, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. This is where the truth gets sharp. And if you have ever loved someone like this, if you have ever been the one trying to save what kept hurting you, what you are about to hear may finally help you stop looking back. Because once you understand why they cannot recover from losing you, you stop waiting for them to become who they promised they would be. You stop checking over your shoulder. You stop carrying concern for someone who used your heart as shelter while breaking it piece by piece. Understand why this loss hits so hard? You have to understand what the super empath was giving in the first place. The narcissist lives on outside attention, praise, desire, approval, reactions, the feeling of being important in someone else's eyes. That outside fuel is what keeps their false self running. Without it, everything inside them starts shaking, but not all attention feeds them in the same way. A lot of people give them shallow supply. Compliments, admiration, excitement. People respond to the image, to the confidence, to the polished act, to the version built for display. And yes, the narcissist takes all of it, but it never lasts. It fades fast. It is like pouring water into a cup with no bottom. Then the super empath enters, and everything changes. Because the super empath does not only see the shine, they notice the pain under it. They feel the fear behind the control. They sense the shame beneath the grand performance. They read what most people miss. And instead of stepping back right away, they move closer. That is the difference. They do not just admire the mask. They reach toward the wounded person hiding behind it. That is rare. That is dangerous. And for the narcissist, it feels almost holy. It feels like being found. It feels like being understood without having to confess. And if you think that does not go deep, keep listening, because this is exactly where the attachment becomes far more intense than either person fully understands. Imagine spending your whole life making sure nobody gets too close, making sure every connection stays controlled, measured, edited, and safe enough that no one can touch the raw truth underneath. Then suddenly one person arrives who sees straight through every layer, every defense, every performance, and instead of using that knowledge against you, they stay warm, they stay open, they stay loyal. The super empath offers something the narcissist has been hungry for since the very beginning, even if they could never name it. They offer the chance to be known and still chosen. That is not ordinary attention. That is not just romance. That is emotional oxygen for someone who has lived behind glass. Around the super empath, the narcissist gets flashes of what real humanity might feel like. Not the show, not the role, not the constant performance, just being a flawed person and still being held with care. Those moments are deeply addictive. But here's where the tragedy starts. The narcissist cannot truly receive that gift because receiving it would require dropping the armor. It would require honesty, exposure, surrender. It would require facing the shame they built their entire life to avoid. So instead of letting the love transform them, they feed on it while resisting it. They take the warmth but block the healing. They consume the loyalty but reject the vulnerability it asks from them. And because their whole pattern is built around defense, control, and escape, they eventually do what they always do. They damage the very thing that was keeping them connected to something real. And the second that betrayal becomes undeniable, the countdown begins. When the super empath finally sees clearly and steps away, something breaks inside the narcissist that fresh attention cannot repair. This is not just the loss of a partner. It is the loss of the only connection that ever came close to touching their real self. There's a simple idea here that explains a lot. Healthy people can keep a stable sense of someone they love even during conflict, distance, or disappointment. They can remember the whole person. They can hold love steady even when things hurt. The narcissist often cannot do that in a solid way. Their early emotional world taught them that closeness was shaky, that love could disappear, that safety could turn into pain without warning. So they learned to protect themselves through control, detachment, image, and emotional domination. Then the super empath comes in and does something shocking. They stay through moods, tests, confusion, pressure, and emotional storms that would send most people running. Every time they stay, they quietly challenge the belief that if anyone truly sees them, they will leave. That is why the bond grows so intense under the surface. The narcissist may never say it, may never even think it clearly, but some part of them starts attaching to the super empath as proof that maybe they are not beyond love. Maybe the wound is not the whole story. Maybe there is still something human in them worth choosing. That is why losing this person is not like losing anyone else. It is the loss of evidence, the loss of possibility, the loss of the only love that felt real because it was aimed at something closer to the truth. And when the super empath leaves, they usually do not leave in chaos. That matters more than most people realize. They do not storm out screaming in a way the narcissist can later dismiss. They do not collapse in a way that lets them be labeled weak, unstable, needy, or impossible. No, the super empath often leaves after doing deep inner work. They leave with painful clarity. Their voice is calmer, their eyes are open, their grief is real, but so is their decision, and that kind of exit lands differently. It is not a dramatic rejection the narcissist can easily twist into a story that protects their ego. It is much worse for them than that. It feels like a final judgment. In other relationships, the narcissist can tell themselves comforting lies. They can say the other person was too insecure, too sensitive, too damaged, too demanding, too unstable to handle them. But the super empath saw the damage, understood it, made space for it, and still tried. So when that person finally says in words or in silence, I see you, clearly, and I am still choosing to walk away, there is no easy escape from that message. It says, I knew what was under the mask, and even with that understanding, staying became unsafe. That truth follows the narcissist into every room afterward. It echoes at night. It returns in quiet moments. And this is the part most people never see, because on the outside, they may move on fast, smile fast, replace fast, perform fast. But inside, the story has changed, and they know it. That is why they usually rush toward new attention almost immediately. Stillness is dangerous for them. Silence is dangerous. Being alone with their own thoughts is dangerous. So they find someone else, sometimes before the old relationship is fully over, sometimes before the super empath has even processed what just happened. The narcissist moves quickly because motion feels like escape. But here is the problem. This time the distraction does not work the same way. This time they have felt the difference. The super empath got inside the fortress, not all the way, not enough to heal them, but enough to make every shallow connection afterward feel thin. They now know the gap between being admired and being truly seen. They know the gap between someone reacting to the mask and someone touching the hidden wound underneath it with patience, perception, and care. And once that difference is felt, it cannot be unfelt. That is why the next relationship often disappoints them more quickly. The new person may be attractive, loyal, interesting, eager, even deeply devoted, but they do not carry that same depth. They do not hold the same emotional range. They do not sense the hidden layers the way the super empath did. So the narcissist starts chasing the feeling instead of the person. They want that rare experience back, but they want it without the exposure, without the accountability, without the mirror, and that is impossible. Watch closely, because this is where the cycle gets even darker. They keep trying to replace what was never replaceable, and each failed attempt quietly increases the emptiness they are running from. What the narcissist often never understood while the relationship was happening is that the super empath was doing far more than loving them. The super empath was regulating them. The narcissist's inner world is not peaceful. It is full of swings. One moment they feel superior, the next they feel hollow. One moment they need worship, the next they feel unbearable shame. One moment they rage, the next they go numb. Most people cannot stay close to that level of emotional chaos for long. They either get fooled by the mask and never see the storm, or they sense it and back away. But the super empath has, an unusual ability. They can remain grounded in someone else's emotional weather. They can absorb impact. They can stay steady while another person is spinning. They can hear the insult and still feel the wound underneath it. They can witness the anger without instantly becoming that anger. So little by little, without either person fully naming it, the super empath becomes an emotional container, a place where the narcissist dumps fear, rage, confusion, insecurity, and shame. A place where the overflow goes, a place where chaos gets held, softened, and redirected. That is why the bond feels so powerful. The super empath becomes, in a very real emotional sense, an external stabilizer for a person who never learned how to stabilize themselves. And if you want to understand why the narcissist cannot recover after betraying this person, do not miss this point. They did not only lose love. They lost the human system that was helping them hold themselves together without ever getting credit for it. So when the super empath is gone, the narcissist is suddenly left alone with the very emotions they spent years handing over. The rage has nowhere to land. The shame has no soft place to dissolve. The emptiness is no longer being covered by someone else's loyalty, patience, and emotional labor. Everything they outsourced begins flooding back. And this does not feel like ordinary heartbreak. It feels like internal exposure, like standing in bad weather with no shelter and no skin. The cruel part is that they often do not even understand what is happening. They may call it boredom, restlessness, irritation, disappointment with the new person, a need for more excitement. But underneath those labels is a deeper reality. They do not know how to be with themselves. They do not know how to sit in their own pain without turning it outward, covering it up, or run from it. The super empath used to help them do that without either person saying it directly. The super empath brought calm into rooms full of tension. They brought steadiness into conflict. They brought meaning into emotional emptiness. They brought depth where there would otherwise only be performance. Without that influence, the narcissist becomes even more dependent on distraction, more attention, more admiration, more control, more chaos. Anything to avoid the silence that now feels louder than ever. And here is the line you need to remember if you were the one on the receiving end of this relationship. Their inability to live peacefully after you leave is not proof that they loved you in a healthy way. It is proof that they depended on what you were doing for them at a level they never understood and were never willing to take responsibility for. The real torment begins when they realize, even if only in flashes, that nobody else can do what the super empath did. Plenty of people can admire them. Plenty of people can be impressed, seduced, entertained, or manipulated. Plenty of people can play a role in the cycle for a while, but very few can look beneath the act, detect the hidden pain, stay strong in the storm, and still offer warmth without immediate collapse. That combination is rare. It is not just kindness. It is depth plus endurance plus perception plus hope. And once the super empath takes that energy back and turns it toward their own healing, the narcissist is left chasing an experience more than a person. They are searching for someone who can once again make them feel real without asking them to become real. Someone who can calm the chaos without naming it. Someone who can love the wound without requiring change, but that exact door is usually closed for good. The super empath learns, they awaken, they stop pouring their life force into someone who keeps using it to avoid transformation. And because they stop, the narcissist meets a hard wall that no performance can break through. This is why they may seem increasingly restless, increasingly dissatisfied, increasingly reactive with new people. The comparison is always there, whether they admit it or not. The old connection set a standard their future choices cannot meet because the missing ingredient was not beauty, charm, status, or devotion. It was soul level recognition. And when a person has had that once and then destroyed it with their own behavior, every weaker version afterward feels like an echo in an empty room. But there is something even deeper, and this may be the hardest part of all. The super empath did not only see who the narcissist was, they saw who the narcissist could have become. That is the haunting part. That is the ghost that stays. Because the super empath often senses not just the damage and the defenses, but also the buried possibility underneath them. They can see the softer self hidden under control. They can feel the human being trapped beneath the armor. They can imagine the version of that person who could choose truth over image, accountability over blame, healing over dominance, connection over control. And they do not imagine it in a foolish way. They see the darkness too. They just also see the untouched part that could still grow if the person ever became brave enough to face themselves honestly. That belief is a powerful gift. It tells the narcissist, on some level, you are more than this pattern. You are not only your mask. You are not only your wound. There is still a real self in here worth reaching for. But here is where the story turns painful. The narcissist cannot rise to that belief unless they are willing to meet shame without running. Real shame, quiet shame, the kind that does not explode outward as blame or anger, but turns inward as truth and says, this is what I have become and I must change. That is the doorway to healing. And that doorway is exactly what their whole personality structure has been built to avoid. So when they betray the super empath, they are not only betraying another person, they are betraying the possible self that supersta sovereignty de super da empath saw and held space for. That is why the aftermath carries such a heavy and hidden grief. Somewhere inside, the narcissist knows they were offered a path and refused it. They were given a rare kind of love, not weak love, not blind love, but steady love that could have walked beside real change if they had chosen it. They were given someone who could have survived the truth with them. Someone who had enough emotional depth to stay present while the old defenses broke apart. Someone who believed there was still a better self buried under all the damage. And instead of stepping toward that future, they chose the familiar prison. They chose the performance. They chose the lie that feels safer than exposure. They chose control over growth. They chose comfort over honesty. They chose the mask over the work. This is why the loss sticks. Because now the door feels sealed. Not because healing is impossible in some absolute sense, but because they know how rare that level of support was, and they know how unlikely it is that anyone else will ever offer the same thing again after the destruction they caused. The super empath was not just another partner. They were a bridge to a different life, and the narcissist burned that bridge themselves. If you are still here, really hear this, because this next truth matters. People like this often do not break because they lost control of you. They break because losing you forces them to feel, however briefly, how much of themselves they abandoned when they chose the pattern over the possibility of becoming whole. And while they are spiraling through that private collapse, the super empath is changing too, and this is the part the narcissist cannot bear to witness. The super empath does not stay shattered forever. They grieve, yes, they doubt themselves. They replay moments. They ask painful questions. They feel the weight of what they tolerated and the sadness of what they hoped could still be saved. But then something powerful happens. The energy that was once poured into managing someone else's chaos starts returning home. Their mind clears, their body settles, their intuition sharpens, their self-respect begins to rebuild, not as loud revenge, but as quiet alignment. They stop confusing love with self-abandonment. They stop chasing understanding from someone committed to misunderstanding them. They stop trying to prove their value to a person who benefited from them forgetting it. And as they heal, their light changes. It is no longer the exhausted glow of someone overgiving in order to keep the peace. It becomes something stronger, cleaner, more rooted. They laugh differently. They rest differently. They choose differently. They form healthier bonds. Their creativity returns. Their peace returns. Their standards rise. And, the narcissist, through whatever distance remains, sees enough to understand what this growth means. It means the super empath was not the weak one. It means the relationship was draining them. It means that their presence, ibig na binawichen, it's a krasantraduary, wade shorts in weight, not a gift. It means the person they secretly believed would stay bent around their chaos is now standing taller without them. That is devastating because it destroys the fantasy that the super empath needed them more than they needed the super empath. This thriving becomes a mirror the narcissist cannot easily escape, not because the super empath is speaking to them, but because their life itself becomes the message. No dramatic speech is required. No revenge is required. No final argument is required. The healing says everything. It says, I was not broken because I left. I began healing because I left. It says, the confusion lifted when the chaos ended. It says, my peace did not die without you. It returned without you. That kind of truth hits harder than any accusation ever could. The narcissist may try to mock it, deny it, minimize it, or pretend not to notice, but sexer. But inside, they feel the meaning. They know that if the super empath is becoming more alive in their absence, then the relationship was not proof of love. It was proof of harm. And that realization is almost impossible for them to process without touching the shame they spend their life avoiding. So what do they do instead? They keep moving, they keep performing, they keep restarting the cycle with new faces, new stories, new promises, new excuses. But the original silence remains underneath all of it. And if you were the one who walked away, this is the closure many people wait years to understand. Their future performance is not your responsibility. Their suffering's not your assignment. Their emptiness is not your emergency. You were never meant to become the emotional life support system for someone committed to refusing their own healing. You were meant to come back to yourself. And if this is hitting something deep in you right now, do not skip this part, because the ending matters more than the pain that came before it. So the reason the narcissist cannot truly recover after betraying a super empath is not simply that they lost someone loving. It is that they lost someone rare, someone who saw beneath the surface and still stayed, someone who offered not just attention but emotional depth, steadiness, and belief, someone who absorbed storms they should never have had to absorb, someone who reflected back a version of the narcissist that might have been real if only they had been brave enough to change. When they destroyed that bond, they did not just lose supply, they lost their best mirror, their strongest emotional container, their clearest chance at being seen without disguise. And when that mirror walks away and then begins to shine brighter elsewhere, the narcissist is left with something they cannot spin forever. The knowledge that what they ruined was precious, and what did they say, they chose instead was hollow. That is why the silence follows them. That is why the replacements do not satisfy them. That is why the thriving of the super empath feels like a sentence they cannot appeal. And if you are the one who survived this kind of relationship, let this be the moment you stop carrying their unfinished story on your back. Let this be the moment you understand that your healing is not only your freedom, it is the final answer. You do not need them to admit what they did. You do not need them to awaken. You do not need them to become better so your pain makes sense. Your clarity is enough. Your exit is enough. Your peace is enough. And your life, fully reclaimed, is the one thing they can never steal back.